Hello and welcome to Perspectives. I'm your host, Dr. Rondrick Williamson. Today we're discussing a topic that has the potential to affect every human being. It's leukemia. Leukemia is cancer of the blood cells. Cancer in general is a group of diseases characterized by uncontrolled growth and spread of abnormal cells. If the spread is not controlled, it can result in death. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to give you not only information, but hope, so that you won't have to be a part of the statistic, but you can be a survivor. That's the name that our first guest wears proudly. Jamie Kaplan, a sports icon in Middle Georgia, was diagnosed with extramedullary myeloid leukemia in 2010. And when we come back, she's going to share her story with us. We'll be right back. Hey, if you're just joining us, we're talking to Jamie Kaplan, who was diagnosed with acute extramedullary myeloid leukemia in 2010. Jamie, let's start from the beginning. How did you find out you had leukemia?
Well, I was very fortunate because I had been having some leg pain and thought I was just having some sciatic pain, and so I'd had that a little bit when I was on the tour. So for about 6 weeks, I just lived with it. It's going to go away eventually, and just got pretty excruciating. It was acting strange because if I rested, I'd wake up the next day. If I took a couple of days off from tennis and wake up the next day, and it would feel fine, start playing again, start hurting again. And I thought, well, this is kind of strange. Went to my orthopedic doctor here, and he x-rayed my back and didn't see anything. And I'm very fortunate that he pursued it. He's been my doctor, Bill Barnes, been my doctor for, 25, 30 years, and he knows that I have a pretty high pain tolerance. And so when I was complaining about something, he's like, something must be up. And so
a little different.
Right. So he did an MRI, and it said I had a fractured sacrum because there was some edema on my sacrum. And so they just thought, well, she's got a fractured sacrum. And I still was questioning that, as was Dr. Barnes, as to why I would have a fractured sacrum, because I had never broken a bone in my body. They did a bone density study, and that was fine. And so Dr. Barnes ordered some additional tests, a CT scan and a bone scan. And the CT scan showed this tissue that was in the neuroforamina area. And they biopsied my sacrum and ended up sending off to University of Virginia, and it came back atypical, but didn't test positive for anything. And so just one test led to another, and ended up that they biopsied this. They did a needle biopsy of this, quote, tissue, which turned out to be a tumor, and that's where they got the positive diagnosis of the AML. The tumors, it was extramedullary, so it wasn't in my bone marrow. So that made it a little more difficult, because it's, according to my doctors at Emory, they said there's 10 cases in the last 12 years of literature from MD Anderson.
So it's very rare.
Very rare.
Condition. So how long did it take from the time they did the x-ray and said you had a fracture until they actually made the diagnosis?
Well, that was in January. It was about, I think it was January 17th, 18th, that I had my first appointment with Dr. Barnes, and that MRI was that Friday. That was a Monday. That MRI was that Friday. The CT scan and the bone scan were the following Wednesday. So that started some wheels turning, and then I saw an orthopedic oncologist at Emory, but that took a little while to get in with him. And it wasn't considered an emergency at appointment, because we tried to get in quicker, but they didn't think it was an emergency because it was so, I guess maybe that doctor up there had never dealt with the extramedullary AML. And so, all along people just thought, well, that's swelling from the sacrum fracture. But I kept questioning, how to have a sacrum fracture, because usually you get hit really hard or fall from fall out a window,
Something was going on. It was just out of normal.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So how did it change your life, if any, being diagnosed and from that point to today?
Well, everything changed, came to a halt, plans came to a halt. I was very, very lucky that I was allowed by my doctor here, Dr. Jones, Cheryl Jones. She let me go a few extra days before starting treatment to
By the
be
way,
with.
she's wonderful.
She's awesome. If I talk too much about her, I'll start crying, but she's just amazing. Yeah. I mean, she really is as a doctor and just as a person, and you know, obviously when you're faced with something like this, right, you need someone that's really special, right, that is helping you and helping you through it, holding your hand through it, and she's just been amazing. In fact, the day that she got word of my diagnosis, the day she got word of it, she called me and said, you know, can your mom and your brother come on over to the house? And so we actually went over to her house, and she told us the news, but she had already done a lot of contacting before we even got there, and said, now, do you want to do this and this? And I said, absolutely. And so she picked up her cell phone and called the doctor at Emory and said, okay, we need to set this up, right, for next week. Right. And so, you know, it all happened. Everything was already charted out, which was great because we didn't have to worry about that part. Right. And I remember my mom saying to Dr. Jones, if this was your daughter, you know, where would you send her? And she said, I'd send her right up to Emory. And so, you know, we felt very comfortable with that decision. And you know, people talk about going and getting second opinions and things like that. And there was a lot of that. There's a lot of chatter about doing that. And we just felt so comfortable from the start with Dr. Jones's recommendation and then with the people at Emory that we felt like that's where we should be.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. Being Dr. Jones was so supportive for you, I want to talk about your support network. Your family, friends. I know I read an article and you said you feel like that Macon owns you, or that you have a lot to give back to Macon. Can you expound on that for me if you can, just a little bit about your support network?
Well, when I played on the tour, I had so much support here from you know, just the locals. I had some people that financially supported me, and then if I ever played, I had tournaments in Hilton Head or Amelia Island. There were always people from Macon there, and so it was neat. If I was within a couple hundred miles of Macon, there were always a lot of people there to support me.
Fan club, so to speak.
Well, I wouldn't call it a fan club. And then my family's here. My mom is still here, and my brother Mike is still here and his family, and I have family in Atlanta. My brother Hugh's up in Atlanta, and then my sister who came and helped out a lot during my illness is in Miami. So we're all very close-knit family. And then Macon's a family to me. I was born and raised here. My father was born here. I think his father moved here when he was like 3 years old or something. So just been here a long time, been very involved in the community, and have just always felt like Macon supported me so much. And you know, people say to me, you could have gone anywhere in the world when you were done playing tennis. Why Macon? And I love it here. And, you know, this time of year is just absolutely beautiful, and it's just very blessed to live here, I think.
So what would you recommend to other individuals who may be experiencing some type of tragic diagnosis or diagnosis that they felt was life-changing? What support would you recommend for their families and friends?
Well, a positive attitude is number one, and surround yourself with people with a positive attitude, because there's just no room at all for negative. And it's like my brother said when we walked out of Dr. Jones's house that afternoon. He said, okay, you can have a pity party for the next 24 hours, which I didn't end up doing that. I mean, I went to the Allman Brothers concert that night with a lot of friends because I already had that planned and wanted to be with friends that evening. And he said, you can have a pity party for 24 hours, but once that's done, he said, we're tackling this thing head on. He said, we're not going to make fun of it by any means, but we're going to laugh and we're going to joke, and we're going to try to do that as much as possible and try to remain
live, so
right,
even in the midst of the diagnosis. So let's switch gears just a little bit, Jamie, and talk about what I believe is your passion, basketball and tennis. Now, I read that in 1978, I think I was 6 years old in 1978.
Thank you for that.
That you were on the state basketball team or something about the GISA state title at Stratford. Could you tell us?
That's right. I played basketball at Stratford, which I did love basketball, and had the opportunity to go to a couple of colleges to play basketball and tennis. But tennis, I knew I had more of a future professionally than basketball at the time. Didn't really have that much in the way of being a professional basketball player. So I was fortunate enough in the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade to play on 3 state championship teams at Stratford. In fact, 9th and 10th grade we were undefeated, so that was really neat.
Wow. Jamie, we got to take a little break.
Okay.
We'll be right back with Perspectives. Stay tuned. Check this out. This is called The Buzz. This is the segment of the show where I highlight what's going on in Macon and Middle Georgia. Tonight at 7:30 at the Macon Centralplex, WrestleMania Revenge. For those wrestling fans, you may want to check this out. Also this weekend, tomorrow is Mother's Day. Marco's Ristorante Italiano is having a Mother's Day brunch. The cost is $39. You may want to take advantage of that. That's The Buzz for this week. Hey, welcome back to Perspectives. Again, we're talking to Jamie Castle on today concerning her diagnosis of leukemia in 2010. Jamie, just to pick up from here, let's talk about, I know in the last segment we talked about basketball. Tell me a little bit about your tennis career. Now, I play tennis a little bit. I know nothing about the rules of the game. So just tell me a little bit about tennis.
Well, I started playing tennis when I was 9 years old, and we had a professional tournament here in Macon, and I mean, we had some of the greats play here. Jimmy Connors has played here, and Rod Laver, and so we had some great players back when I was a little girl. And so my mom was involved with the tournament, and I was a ball girl for the tournament, and that was my first exposure to tennis. And so I decided I want to be a professional tennis player. It's just like you ask a little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, well, I want to be a professional tennis player from that first ball that I hit. And so that's the course that I was on. And so I just played tennis all day, during the summer, and when school was in session, I'd go every day after school and play tennis. And so I was just on my course to be a professional tennis player. So I went to college. I played 2 years at Georgia, and then 2 years at Florida State, and then I turned professional. And that was 1983. Played on the satellite tour and played in Australia and played in Japan. And in fact, I was in the prefecture where I wasn't in the city where the earthquake happened, but I was in that area, and so my ranking got high enough in doubles that I could start playing on the big circuit. So my singles ranking wasn't high enough, but my doubles was. So I had to make the decision, do I want to play Wimbledon in doubles or keep playing these satellites in singles? So, of course, I went the doubles route, and at one point was 91 in the world in doubles. And so I was very fortunate to be able to travel the world and do that. And
are you giving any lessons?
Am I giving any lessons? Not yet. I'm not back on the court yet. I was told back when they thought I had the fractured sacrum to stop teaching tennis and stop playing tennis, and so I did that last January, and then I actually got on the court a few weeks ago and hit a few balls around, and so I'm almost ready to get back. I got to wait until Dr. Jones tells me it's okay.
You're going to do whatever Dr. Jones.
That's right. That's right.
So tennis, were you more favorable for tennis or basketball? What's your biggest love?
Well, don't tell anyone, but I loved basketball more than tennis. Okay, it's just two of us. Okay, basketball more than tennis, but again, the tennis, I had a better chance for a career in that than basketball. Plus, I'd already had a knee surgery at 16. I tore my ACL and my medial meniscus, so I had a pretty major knee surgery at 16 years old.
Right. Wow, that's a young age to have knee surgery.
Yeah, but it's interesting. My mother brought this up the other day. She said when I had this, at 16 years old, you have this knee surgery, you want to be a professional tennis player, and you think it's the end of the world. I'm never going to walk again, much less play tennis again. And so it was pretty tough on me at 16 years old to face what I faced with the surgery, because it's nothing like it is now. I have an incision this long so I was in the hospital 11 days, and my mother remembered this woman saying to her, this is preparing her for something later in life. Wow. And so it's very interesting that did, because I did face something like that so young, that when I was faced with this, I'm like, okay, we're taking this head on just like we took that head on.